North Korea has become one of the world's poorest countries, relying mainly on Chinese aid for its economic survival. However, North Korea once had a significantly higher per capita GDP than its southern neighbor, South Korea, as well as its most powerful ally, China, which at the time was far more powerful than the South. However, as time passes and things change, it has come to the point where North Korea is falling behind to the point where its people are starving and living in absolute poverty because of this. So, what happened to North Korea? Why did it become so poor? Well, follow us during the whole video as we reveal the mystery of North Korea's insane poverty. You see, in the early 1970s, North Korea's economy experienced a sharp upturn, with its nominal GDP per capita going from $384 to $836 in 1985, an increase in the country's growth rate on an annual basis of up to 25%. In comparison, China reached the landmark of $600 per capita only 10 years later, in 1995, which is 10 years after the US. It is estimated that North Korea will be able to expand rapidly in the coming years due to rapid growth in urbanization, rapid industrialization, and an increase in demand for Western-inspired products. It should be noted that rapid growth is being accompanied by a sharp increase in life expectancy to 70 years and a sharp reduction in childhood mortality rate to 20% as well. As the North Korean population grows and the city expands, Pyongyang becomes one of the biggest cities in the world. The city's population reaches 3 million by the end of the 20th century. As North Korea's wealth increases, it starts imitating the consumer tastes of Western countries as it gets richer. In North Korean magazines published in the late 1970s and early 1980s, you can find spectacular double-page spreads with high-quality textiles and stylish fashion designs that are reminiscent of Western fashion at the time. At the end of the 1980s, Pyongyang became Asia's fashion capital. While most of the textile designs that were available to South Koreans at this time imitated those of Western countries, Pyongyang's impact on Chinese fashion at this time was unmatched. It was after a flood in 1984 that North Korea donated 7,200 tons of rice, 550,000 yards of cloth, and 759 cases of medicine to the South Korean government, coinciding with a peak in North Korean grain production of 10 million tons during the year. It is probably fair to say that the South Korean case study is one of the most widely known examples of foreign aid's success. Nevertheless, North Korea also benefited greatly from overseas assistance during the mid-1900s, with the Soviet Union and China providing economic assistance in the form of low or no interest loans, totaling around $200 billion between 1950 and 1970. There is no doubt that a generous loan from socialist countries resulted in considerable government spending, including irrigation, mechanical farming, transportation, education, and free healthcare. So, everything was going well. But what really happened to wreak havoc on the entire North Korean economy so dramatically? You see, there is no guarantee that growth would last forever, and North Korea was no exception. A decade before the 1990s, the South Korean economy was experiencing its own industrial revolution and was opening itself up more and more to international trade, which resulted in a per capita GDP that far exceeded that of North Korea. 30 years after the Korean War ended, the South Korean per capita GDP is 40 times higher than that of North Korea. While the south of Korea is experiencing dramatic growth based on exports, the north of the country is still reeling from the collapse of the Soviet Union. And as a result of the loss of its largest source of oil, the lack of the alternative means of energy generation, North Korea is unable to provide enough electricity for the country. And on top of that, in the early 1990s, the country is driven into widespread famine. Over the course of several years, floods, a reduction in aid from the international community, and poor planning resulted in a 60% reduction in food production. And there are many things that Kim, the second son's government, did to alleviate food shortages, including launching a 2 meals a day campaign and mandating work in the fields in order to do so. While North Korea received Western aid for the first time, it is estimated that the country's death toll from starvation and malnutrition amounted to 1 million people, or 5% of the country's population of 22 million. It is believed that North Korea is still suffering from severe malnutrition and poverty even today. Despite most rural areas of North Korea, often home to the poorest citizens, being largely off-limits to the international media, the country remains regarded as one of the poorest countries in the world, and rates of extreme poverty remain among the highest on the planet. However, it has been reported that as a result of the famine, 18-year-old North Korean men are on average 5 inches shorter than their South Korean counterparts, and that nearly half of all children under the age of 5 were reported to be malnourished in 2011. In spite of the fact that hospitals in North Korea remain free at the point of delivery, it is speculated that they're generally only accessible to Pyongyang's elite due to the lack of state funding. Reports indicate that these hospitals are also critically under-resourced, with hospitals reporting a severe lack of heating, medicines, and operating equipment. Looking at the stats, according to the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, North Korean gross domestic product GDP stood at $40 billion in 2015, according to the CIA's World Factbook, which hasn't updated its GDP information since that time. In terms of GDP per capita, North Korea had a per capita GDP of $1,700. The agriculture sector makes up 22.5% of GDP, the manufacturing sector makes up 47.6%, and the service sector makes up 29.6%. Moreover, some analysts argue that the country still makes significant investments in its military, and some analysts even argue that these investments may actually have a negative impact on the country's economic development. There are estimates that North Korea spent an estimated $4 billion on defense in 2019, the most recent year for which estimates are available. This represents approximately 24% of its gross domestic product. Several experts argue that North Korea is developing weapons through a Soviet-style party military complex, where the ruling party leadership surrounding Kim exercises full control over defense industries, and does not face any constraints in concentrating national resources on the development of weapons. As KCNA's report on the assembly meetings indicated, North Korea was struggling to revive its moribund economy, battered by mismanagement, US-led sanctions over Kim's nuclear ambitions, and border closures associated with COVID-19. It has been reported that Finance Minister Ko Jong-bom has lamented unspecified shortcomings in the collection of taxes from state-owned companies. According to KCNA, the deputy premier asked economic workers to strengthen their ideological resolve and put the interests of the entire country before those of their own units. Ko said in his speech that the budget for this year should be implemented without fail in order to financially support the efforts in order to strengthen the country's defense capabilities and economy. According to him, 45% of this year's budget will be spent on a huge umbrella category that covers efforts to develop the economy and improve the standard of living of the people. North Korean officials have described 2023 as a crucial year in realizing Kim's economic goals, set out in a 5-year development plan that runs until the year 2025. But when you think about it, as a country that went from economic prosperity in the 1970s and 1980s to sweeping malnourishment and poverty in the present day, North Korea illustrates the damaging effects that irresponsible governments and a reluctance to modernize can have on decades of progress. There is no doubt that the economic history of North Korea has been characterized by periods of stagnation and crisis, as well as intermittent phases of economic recovery and some economic growth. It seems that the regime has prioritized the development of Korea as a defense economy to the exclusion of food production, human rights, and living standards. Currently, the country is facing a large number of health issues, including human trafficking. Many men, women, and children are being forced to work in forced labor camps and are being trafficked. Moreover, North Korea is also one of the largest sources of labor for foreign governments, usually those from Russia and China. So it is important to point out that North Koreans have no choice when it comes to the work they're assigned by the government. They cannot change their jobs, and if they attempt to escape their forced labor, they face punishment from the government. But regardless, what do you guys feel about North Korea? Do you think its dictatorship will make the country a better place? Tell us in the comments. And that's it for today's video. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more such videos like this. Don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified when we upload a new video. We'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.